Good evening, everybody. If we could take our seats. Thank you. So it is Thursday, the 3rd of February 2022, and it's 7:15. So we're going to start our extraordinary meeting of the Council. So good evening. Before I move through the agenda items with us, can I just advise everybody present of a number of provisions that I'm going to make during this evening, and they all relate to really just working in accordance with our standing orders. So firstly, just to remind members of speaking times, most councillors will be limited to 3 minutes, with the exception of anybody who proposes a motion. The second item I wanted to draw everyone's attention to, just as the leader of the council did at the cabinet meeting, should there be a disturbance at any point during the debate, I may need to adjourn the meeting just to enable things to settle down. And then finally, at the end of our council meeting tonight, could members please stay behind so that members of the public can leave the building first, just so that we don't get too close to one another, and it will make the transition through the entrance hall that much easier. Thank you. So, item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence. Miss O'Connell, are there any?
Thank you, Chairman. We've had apologies from Councillors Tim Ashton and Patricia Wiltshire.
Thank you very much. Item number 2 is disclosure of interests. So, do any members wish to disclose any interests in relation to the main item on our agenda today? I see Councillor Friend.
Thank you, Chairman. As we've progressed through this, we've got more detail in the packs, and I declare a non-pecuniary interest as Church Warden of St John the Evangelist Church, Wootton, which is included in the sites of archaeological expertise, etc., on map 102.
Thank you. Any other member? I can't see any hands raised. So thank you very much. So then, sorry, Councillor, you're right at the far edge. I've missed you. Councillor Moyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a disclosure of interest. It's a request to have a named vote, please.
Okay, when we get to the item, I will ask that at the appropriate time. Thank you, Councillor Moyes. So, councillors, item 3 on our agenda. The recommendation before us this evening comes from the extraordinary cabinet meeting, which immediately preceded our meeting today, and relates to the submission of the draft local plan to the Secretary of State for levelling up housing and communities. Therefore, members are asked to consider the report set out on pages 3 to 9 of the agenda, and it is subject to a small change which the Cabinet agreed just a few minutes ago. If any members weren't present for that, I'll just read out what those changes were. They are of a minor nature in terms of it, that they don't affect the substance. But on the published recommendations, items number 2 and 3, to replace the words Deputy Chief Executive with the words Executive Head of Service with responsibility for planning policy, and then that ties in with the scheme of delegation which the Councillor uses, just so that everything is proceeded, if Council wishes, along those lines. So, Councillor Margaret Cooksey, could I please ask you to introduce this item, and you have up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members, with apologies to Charles Dickens, we need a local plan to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. We have one crucial issue before us this evening, and the decision we make will have far-reaching consequences for the future of our district. Do we agree to submit the draft local plan with all of the additional documents to the Inspectorate, or do we abort the current process and go back to the drawing board? Well, let's start with the current situation. Our current plan is way out of date and was put on deposit on the 18th of April 1996. over a quarter of a century ago. This means that development management officers are having to deal with policies that are no longer fit for purpose. Policies in relation to greenbelt, character and design, biodiversity, climate change, amongst others, provide officers and members with serious problems when determining planning applications. No wonder, when the policies were adopted so long ago, Mr. Clark has identified some interesting facts that I identify just how long ago. George W. Bush first became President of the United States. Ken Livingstone was first elected the Mayor of London, and Kevin Keegan was the England football manager. 1996. That's how dated our current policies are. Moyle Valley has a problem. Our failure against the government's housing delivery test has worsened, and the government says that we are in presumption of sustainable development, which means that our local policies no longer count. The government are threatening to take over the planning policy function of councils without a local plan in place next year, and the planning consultancy, Lichfields, identified Moyle Valley as one of the top 21 councils most likely to be taken over. No wonder the Housing Minister, Chris Pincher, wrote in a personal note to me that, and I quote, "All local authorities should continue to develop up-to-date local plans. Failure to do so exposes residents to speculative development risk." We must heed his words and move on with the process. There have been questions levelled at us with respect to a view that we are rushing the process. However, you can see by the timetable on page EC7, table 2, that we will only just meet the required deadline by submitting now. Any delay could prove to be devastating for Moyle Valley. Having dealt with the threats involved in not agreeing to the resolution, let's look at the positive factors in moving this version of the local plan forwards in a timely manner. This plan provides us with our own local target of 353 new homes per year instead of the government's algorithm-devised target of 458 new homes per year. Stronger affordable housing policies, including a requirement for social rented housing on certain types of developments. Stronger infrastructure policies, identifying locations for new infrastructure. Stronger climate change policies, including a commitment for major new residential developments to be zero carbon. Stronger protection of our precious green belt. Stronger biodiversity policies with a requirement for 20% biodiversity net gain on development sites, Moyle Valley being the first council to require this in their plan, as well as stronger design and heritage policies. Mr. Chairman, I believe that this plan is sound and legally compliant and ready for submission. And before I move the recommendations, I must take breath and thank the officer team whose hard work and diligence under very difficult circumstances has brought us to this point. I cannot praise them enough. They have dealt with difficult working arrangements through COVID. They have listened to issues raised by members and been very patient in clarifying what have been difficult concepts at times. Worst, though, is that they have been subjected to too many rude and demeaning comments from some residents at times and have dealt with every issue in the most professional way possible. I thank them on behalf of the whole council. Mr. Chairman, it would be a miracle to have produced a plan that suited all members 100%. Most of us will have issues within the plan that we are not wholeheartedly content with. However, I believe that any pain has been fairly shared, and for the sake of the whole district, not just our own wards, we must move this plan forward. Mr. Chairman, I move the recommendations are set out on page EC3 with the amendments and trust to the good sense of council to support them, and happy to propose a named vote, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And as this comes from Cabinet, it doesn't require a seconder. So I've noted that I've had 2 requests for a name vote. So do we put that to a vote now? Yes. So can I just have an indication of all those members who would support a named vote to please show? Yeah, we've met the criteria. Thank you very much. So there will be a name vote at the end of any debate. Thank you, Councillor. Before I ask if any other councillors wish to speak, Councillor Simon Budd, you missed the item where we had a declarations of interests, and Councillor Helen Clack as well. Do you have any interests that you wish to declare?
Apologies for my lateness, Chairman, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you both. Thank you. Okay. So, I'm calling now for any members who wish to speak. Please indicate by your hand. Councillor Elizabeth Daly, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
I am, of course, totally opposed to greenbelt developments, so I am pleased that the Council has deleted so many of the greenbelt sites we inherited in 2019, including Bookham Fields in my own ward. I look forward to raising residents' concerns about the remaining sites at Preston Farm and Hunter's Moon, and the need for better infrastructure from Surrey County Council and other agencies with the inspector in due course. I understand that planning guidelines require the draft plan to be submitted largely unamended together with the comments received, and that is what I shall be voting for tonight. I am disappointed that some developers are trying to challenge the changes we have made to reduce the amount of greenbelt development. I strongly oppose these challenges, and I hope the Council will too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members? Councillor David Harper, I see. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And there's a lot that is good in this local plan, and there's an awful lot of work gone into it, and that has to be an important recognition. So I'm speaking on what I see as the weaknesses, because that's what I've got to do in my time allotted. Firstly, for any resident watching, I'd like to point out that we as councillors have never been asked to approve this plan. We've only been asked to move it forward in a process. We're not asked to approve it tonight. We're asked to submit it. And I think there's an old saying about if good men who do nothing are actually complicit in the result. And that might weigh on some people's minds tonight. In section 1.4 of the agenda, the draft plan is critiqued by an advisory inspector, which illuminates concerns felt by many members of this council. Under "Is the plan justifies?" it observes the National Highways, no less, was not content with the Strategic Highways assessment, and having rerun the assessment, we have now rerun it, find that strategic interventions may be needed around Junction 9, Dorking and Hookwood. I wonder if we can find out if may will become will before we submit this plan, and if it is will, who's going to pay for those strategic interventions? Secondly, there are concerns about methodology of the Greenbelt release, and notably sites have been eliminated on the basis of strategic function only and not site-specific reasons. It's not entirely clear to me what this means, but I'm going to go on and make some assumptions. Site-specific eliminated strategic sites were those whose boundaries performed an important function. Greenbelt boundaries performed an important function. But Bear Green's strategic site boundaries were evaluated as not performing that well. However, it's been eliminated not on site-specific reasons, therefore, but views in and out of the AONB. When these views can be mitigated, probably with sedum roofs, etc., I'm not an expert, or one could consider that actually those are not materially different from the current views of Bear Green in and out of the AONB. This weakness in consistency also seems to me a good reason to find security on this issue before submitting to the inspector. And regarding the strategic site in my ward, Ermine Fields, I'm concerned about particulates and health. Although the evidence that Mole Valley refers to concludes it's safe, there are huge and growing concerns generally about air pollution and its effect on public health. And there are central government's clean air strategy is only in the consultation stage. With the prevailing wind from the southwest, particulates matter would be carried from the M25 into this area. And then finally, the impact on the engagement by Surrey Hills AONB is underway, and significant areas, including those in my ward, could see an extension of the AONB into those strategic sites. I think, therefore, some people might think it's sensible to wait for those reviews before we move forward.
Could you sum up, please?
I shall finish there, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other member? Councillor Helen Clack.
Chair, in my ward, Oakwood Hill, the parish of Ockley are very unhappy that having put forward suggestions for a small expansion of the village, which could have been agreed by the community, these suggestions have not been included in the plan before us. Those sites previously discussed and agreed have not been included, and other sites not considered before publication have been brought in, much to the surprise of the parish council and local residents. This council has advised the residents and parish councils to complain directly to the inspector rather than reconsidering. And as a Surrey County Councillor, I've seen this in other wards in my division, the hamlet of Hookwood, for example, in the parish of Charlwood. Council and Chair, we are asked to approve this plan tonight for submission for the inspector, but how can we do so when our communities don't agree with it? I would urge members to vote against this plan tonight, go back to the drawing board and write a plan with our residents, not against them, and to do the job properly with proper scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Councillor David Hawksworth.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate Margaret Cooksey and her Cabinet members for the work that they've done on this. I think it's been a very difficult process, and they should be congratulated for actually getting it all together to this stage. And I especially welcome some of the new policies that are adopted in this, but I do have a number of concerns and points I think that need to be made. It's important to appreciate this was developed by a Cabinet working group, and I was pleased that the practice of allowing all members to participate in that group, something proposed by the independents initially, was continued throughout the period. This gave us a very good chance to make comments and draw things to the attention of the working group and the officers. I was, however, disappointed that as this process continued, there were no votes taken at any stage, even of ones of guidance as to what might be considered. There was no voting, for example, as to whether a particular site should or should not be included, not to make a decision to preempt the working group, but at least to guide the current administration. So it is important to recognise this is very much a product of the current administration. I remain fundamentally opposed to the strategy of concentrating new developments in the northern part of the district. In the case of Ashted, since the 2011 census to the end of the planned period, the population is set to rise by some 4,000, an increase of 27%. This continues a trend from the 2001 census, which means that as we approach the end of this plan, Ashted will have increased by around 34%, more than a third in size. This huge increase is planned with no significant improvement scheduled or conceived in relation to our congested roads, which are already acknowledged as working at overcapacity, no improvements in public transport, GP surgeries which are already oversubscribed, and dentistry services which are at best disappearing. And schools also suffer because there are good schools from pupils coming into the area from outside the village as well. So because of this fundamental problem, I find the plan as it is unacceptable, and so I'll be voting against it on behalf of the residents not only in Ashted, but also those in Leatherhead, Bookham and Fetcham. I think some pain needs to be brought to bear in other parts of the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Are there any other members? Councillor Mary Huggins, I see first.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to add my thoughts and views to those of Councillor Clack when she was talking about her ward of Oakwood. My residents in Newdigate were very distressed, and I was horrified to find in the Regulation 19 consultation that a completely new site was included in Newdigate, one that we hadn't seen before in any other consultation. They had not been aware of this, None of us had been aware of this until that time. At that late stage, they were not given sufficient time to comment. And although I did bring the matter up at the Planning Policy Working Group, as Councillor Hawksworth has said, there were no votes, there were no decisions particularly taken there on that, from that point of view, and I was advised that no sites can now be changed. So there it was with a very short period of time and a site that they really didn't want and knew nothing about. They had also put in a site of their own which was discounted for various, probably very good reasons, but that doesn't satisfy our residents. And as I said on very many occasions, what we are here for is to do the best we can for our residents. And so if I hadn't brought this up, I would not be doing the best I could for my residents. So I'm a little sad that this administration can claim to have listened properly to the residents regarding this local plan, because I don't believe that that has been the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I just, at this point, thank the members of the public. It is an emotive subject, and I do thank you for sitting there quietly so that we can all hear the speakers. So just wanted to say thank you at this stage. Thank you. The next member I have on the list I've seen is Councillor Sarah Chambers.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd first like to thank Piers Mason for being so helpful towards all the residents and all the inquiries. I am very proud to come from Bookham, where we've had most complaints, most comments, and the fantastic work that the Residents Association have been doing and other groups. I was elected to save the green belt in Bookham and oppose the buildings on Preston Cross and the other areas. I really care for what my residents think. Tonight, I agree we need a local plan, but we need a fair local plan. And too much of the building, as Councillor Hawksworth has been saying, is in the north. And this is totally unfair. I have been speaking to lots of residents, and many residents have been speaking to other councillors. They've even spoken to Councillor Adams only on Monday, asking him to vote against this plan. What I am saying is to the councillors, Daly, Adams and Goodacre, you, like me, represent all the residents of Bookham. The residents of Bookham do not want this plan. It's your duty to represent your residents and vote against this plan, which I hope you will. And I would just like to, again, thank all the officers for the hard work they have been doing, and I hope we'll move together and listen to our residents. That's who we represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. Did I see Councillor James Friend? Thank you, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, officers. Conservative councillors have been clear. We will oppose plans to build on the Greenbelt where local communities have said no. We've been clear that development should be led by creating new infrastructure before urgently needed homes are built. After another 20 weeks, we are presented with essentially the same plan tonight. The first time around, we know residents disagreed with the focus of building on the Greenbelt, and here we are again. It might well be just moving on with the process, but residents are now constantly asking us, where is the leadership in all this? The answer can only be that this administration wants to build on the Greenbelt. This is a missed opportunity still for Mole Valley to lead the way on tackling climate change. We have consistently championed a carbon negative ambition with 10 actions which would go way beyond the carbon neutral limits set out here. We would have truly incentivised the reuse of building materials and made more use of the space above buildings, a key aim of the Conservative government nationally. Worse still is the missed opportunity for investment in our towns with proposed policies that stifle development that could have sustainably brought people back to our town centre, shops and restaurants. There remains a missed opportunity to redirect development into Dorking Town Centre and to redefine the shopping area to meet the needs of modern shoppers. This plan sets a too rigid approach for meeting affordable housing needs. We believe people should have the opportunity to own a home of their own, which is a basic feature of society, and that opportunity should be available to every family. We would increase the affordable home ownership proportions in this plan. This plan still fails to evolve local housing design needs to meet the home working requirements of today's society, where land use is mixed for employment and living, where spaces can be bedrooms or offices. We would have created policies with flexibility built in so that new homes stand a better chance of meeting the needs of future generations. Overall, time and again, the policies simply lack the flexibility to let communities shape their own futures. However, a clear message to the voters from this is that this administration builds on Greenbelt. Before you vote tonight, councillors, remember that the inspector can only inspect the plan put in front of them. If you don't believe in this plan, don't vote to send it to them. If instead you believe Greenbelt land should be preserved, development should be aimed at regenerating our town centres, people should be able to buy their own homes, and that there is much more to be achieved by an innovative, a technological, and yes, a commercial approach to fighting climate change, then don't vote for this plan. Let's be assured that we will make sure every voter in our villages, in Fetcham, in Leatherhead and in Bookham, will know exactly how Conservative councillors Budd, Huggins, Keeley and Moyes vote tonight.
Could you sum up, please?
If Liberal councillors up for re-election this year in Fetcham, Leatherhead and Bookham or in other communities don't believe in this plan, then they have a simple choice. Vote with us, join us, and fight with the Conservatives for our Greenbelt in the elections in 13 weeks' time.
Thank you.
Every vote counts.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Bushnell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that I believe there is a misperception that most of the building is in the north. If you actually look at the figures, it's approximately half and half between north and south. So this misperception continues to be used in arguments, which I think is unfair. And in answer to Councillor Huggins and the position in Newdigate, I would say that in Capel, the residents who have many, many more houses allocated there than Newdigate are largely happy with the local plan, as are the parish council. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bushnell. Although you were responding to the points made, I hope that Councillor Margaret Cooksey will do that unless she feels that you've answered those points on her behalf. Thank you. The next speaker I have is Councillor Lynn Brooks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's no doubt that a local plan is a huge amount of work, and this has taken years to put together. But it has so many holes. I draw you to the Regulation 18 consultation.
Could I ask you to speak up a little bit, please?
Sorry.
Do you want to start again, but speak a bit louder?
I was just going to say, thank you very much. I think the local plan is a huge amount of work. But if you look at the Regulation 18 consultation and the summary, the last one draws my attention time and time again. Residents were concerned that infrastructure would be overwhelmed by housing growth. And what's our reply? Infrastructure providers were also contacted to notify them of housing growth. Well, that's really great, but that doesn't actually help our residents. I've mentioned this, as many other members have mentioned, the lack of infrastructure supporting this plan. I've recently asked 2 questions at local committee, the joint working place for Surrey County Council and Mole Valley District Council, related to their engagement and interaction on a number of areas, in particular special needs education places and healthcare provision. Now let's be very clear, healthcare provision is not a new health hub. It is the planning for GP and secondary and tertiary care appointments via proper qualified resources. Therefore, it appears to me that Mole Valley has done nothing to address the gaps in our local plan, or this administration has not even attempted to address those concerns, and our residents will be at risk knowing that no special education needs places, despite a 31% growth planned,
predicted by County Council will not be available, and there is no agreement with our clinical commissioning group or NHS England on how we are going to get healthcare appointments. So I do think that despite we're running down the clock on this submission, we should actually take a step back and think about plugging some of these holes, which are quite serious holes because they will have a detrimental effect on the health of our residents. As all Fetcham councillors know, we are fully aware that how our residents feel about healthcare provision, having suffered with a potential GP closure recently. So I would hint that most of the Fetcham councillors should vote against this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next speaker is the Vice Chairman of the Council, Councillor Paul Potter.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And thanks to the officers for all the work in this plan. Very difficult time for everyone, really. We're all sitting here tonight, and I don't think any of us woke up one morning and said, let's build all over the Greenbelt. So I totally disagree with Councillor Friend. This has been forced on us by government. Also, I speak to my residents as well, which is what you have to do. And a lot of them say to me, can you tell me where my children are going to live? And my grandchildren. Well, at the moment, we have a developer in Brockham that's actually made that some of that available for people. But it's not a lot happening elsewhere. So there is difficult choices to be made. But when Councillor Friend says they want everyone to own a house, I'd love everyone to own a house. But the average price in Surrey is $460,000. So you tell me where the average worker can afford that. We have to move on this plan. If we don't, they're going to come and tell us where we build. And you could lose all your Greenbelt. So it's a difficult decision, and I think it's one we're going to have to make with regret. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Roger Adams. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an excellent plan, a very sound plan, given the constraints. Is it an ideal plan for Mole Valley? No, it's not. But who's to blame, Mr. Chairman? It's certainly not this administration. It's not even the previous Conservative-led administration, nor the Working Party that worked so very hard, the cross-party Working Party that worked so hard to draw this plan together, and not the officers. The blame, Mr. Chairman, must lie solely with the government. A government that has demanded far many more houses be built in Mole Valley than is required by local demand. A government that has ignored the fact that Mole Valley has large swathes of Greenbelt land and not very much land to build on. A government that overrode Guildford Borough Council to give permission to Berkeley Homes to build a large housing estate on Greenbelt land right on the borders of my ward in Bookham. A site, Mr. Chairman, that is devoid of public transport and where everyone would need a car. Despite that, the government are urging people to get out of their cars and use public transport. What planet do these people live on? Quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, I have no confidence in the government whatsoever. And that has been confirmed by the residents of Chesham and Amersham who saw the truth. And hopefully the residents of Mole Valley will also see the truth. So we have a decision tonight, Mr. Chairman. We can either kick the can down the road, and kicking it much further down the road will mean to say the government will come in, take the planning process out of our hands, and you can be sure that they will build all the houses they want to build on our Greenbelt land. Otherwise, we can accept this proposal and we can put it to the inspector. And that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to vote and hope that the inspector has more intelligence and more common sense than some government ministers, which, Mr. Chairman, I would say wouldn't be too difficult. Can I remind the councillors that we are not voting for this plan or against this plan. We are voting simply to submit this plan to the government inspector. That is all. Now, if we submit this plan to the government inspector, then everyone will have a chance to present their case to that government inspector, and if there are any changes they want to do, then they can speak to those changes. Basically, that's all I have to say. But
thank you, and you've reached your 3 minutes.
I would like to thank all those people who have worked assiduously to get the plan to this stage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I now call on Councillor Caroline Salmon? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We really need to retain control of this plan. And it's something that has been developed with every member being able to add to it. They could all attend the PPWG working group. And it's not fair to say that they were not listened to or that the residents were not listened to. It has been a completely transparent process, and many, many residents from all over the district responded to the first consultation, and some of them responded to the second and said, well done in changing it from the first to the second. Local members could fight their corners, and they did. Everybody did. And certain councillors fought to shove housing the other end of the district, and because they didn't want it in their own patch. But we cannot be NIMBY in these situations. We have to realise that we are given numbers that we have to deliver, and we are being very brave and showing true leadership in creating a plan that we believe will be accepted and will be of a high enough quality to be passed through with probably a few minor amendments. We've been very brave because we haven't tried to fudge any issues. We have been very open and changed it to include more about the climate, more about the environment, more about the infrastructure, all of which have been mentioned. We've also looked to make sure that every site that was potential was considered. We've looked at every suitable brownfield site in the district if we thought that it was potentially sustainable and deliverable. So more ends up in the towns because that's where the brown sites are. I think that it's something we should be very proud of, that this is spread right across the district, the number of houses that are needed, and that it is fair the way it's been spread. Nobody wants to build on the green belt because it's very important to us and we use it for our recreation and to improve our mental health. Now, if we don't have a valid plan and we don't put it forward, we will have developers going, I'm going to build over there. I don't care where it is. I own the land already. I'm just going to shove houses up, and we won't be able to do anything about it. We really need to control the planning in our district, and this is the way that we can put it forward, the ones that we think are the best sites.
Could you sum up, please?
Not just the ones who want. To sum up, every good man was given an opportunity to be involved, and good woman, even though we've been criticised for it. I think it's a very good plan. I think it's very fair. And I think it's one that the officers are proud of, and we should all be proud of too.
Thank you very much. The next speaker I have is Councillor David Preedy.
Thank you, Chairman. I missed the initial developments of the local plan as I was taking a 4-year sabbatical by 6 votes. However, I did look at the Conservative government's housing targets, and I was appalled to see how the so-called mutant algorithm would demand at the time 2.9 times as many new properties in Mole Valley as were needed for local demand. And when I read of many luxury developments approved in London, which not only failed to provide affordable dwellings, but were in many cases barely occupied investments for wealthy foreigners, I realised why this target was being imposed. Then plans were leaked to build 600 houses on the countryside in the Greenbelt between Leatherhead and Headley. Our community was rightly worried about the impact on traffic and the loss of important countryside, and some residents found that the resulting 18 months of planning blight made it impossible to sell their houses. After the election, I could see for the first time the state of the local plan that had been developed under the previous administration led by the Conservatives. And firstly, I breathed a massive sigh of relief that the site near Headley was not being supported, even though I couldn't share this information with concerned residents. However, I then wondered, how was the housing target being met? And it became clear it was being met by a lot of major developments in the Green Belt. And I wondered, why can't we not have them in the Green Belt? And then I realised what the Conservatives who support this have not told us, that it would need 56 tower blocks in our towns. And I haven't heard the residents of Bookham and Fetcham and Leatherhead and Ashted and Dorking and the other centres being told about this, but that's the sort of scale of development that will be needed in our towns. The Regulation 18 consultation took a lot of these proposals out to the community. Together with more rigorous assessment of Greenbelt criteria, it's provided the evidence that this council needs to challenge the mutant algorithm, to cut the number of new dwellings overall and to reduce substantially the proposed loss of Greenbelt. Fewer new homes will place less pressure on infrastructure, and the plan includes a full programme of infrastructure requirements. It's notable that many of the strongest Regulation 19 objections now come from house builders. Tonight we face a critical decision. If we decide not to submit this plan, we should be fully aware of the consequences. We will probably miss the opportunity to get into the process before new government regulations are introduced, regulations which are expected to reduce our local control of planning policy. We will delay and perhaps entirely give up our ability to introduce the ecological and biodiversity policies, which we've heard about already this evening, and which are so regularly demanded every month at Development Management Committee. And by extending the period when we cannot demonstrate a housing land supply, we risk a free-for-all as developers race to get permission to build on land they own.
Could you sum up, please?
Yeah. If any councillors are minded to oppose the submission of this plan, I ask them to think again, and especially think how their residents will react when new applications come in for developments in Greenbelt areas, including those that were not even in the Regulation 18 consultation.
Thank you. Thank you. The next speaker I have is Councillor Tracy Keeley.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
My comments relate to flooding issues. This is a real concern and a threat to Fetcham and its residents. After reviewing the plan, I don't actually see any real agreement with the relevant bodies and consultees to address this going forward. The administration is approving new dwellings within a river valley without proper and thorough consideration of the heightened and significant risks of flooding. I want to see strategic policies setting out an overall strategy for the term of the plan, which makes sufficient provision for flood risks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member? Councillor Harper, you've already spoken, I'm afraid.
I'd like to propose a motion, Chairman.
I've got other members who've signalled, but what motion is it you'd like to propose?
I'd like to propose not to submit this local plan to the inspector.
I think you should have done that during your speech, but I'll just check on that.
If that's the case, Chairman, I offer to second anybody else who wants to, to propose it.
We're just seeking advice. So, Councillor Harper, the advice is to move a motion to not support this, the motion already on the table, negates that motion, and therefore what you do is vote against the motion. You don't need to move a motion to vote against a motion that's already being debated.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it possible, in fact, to propose a slightly amended motion then? That we submit the plan but without any of the strategic Greenbelt sites?
I'll just seek advice. I'm going to invite Mr. Mason to address us on that point.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the recommendation that you have before you is to submit the plan. We only have one plan. We don't have a plan that doesn't have the strategic greenbelt sites in it. And therefore, I don't think you could propose to submit a different plan from the one that's actually on the table. I think you'd be in a position, I think has already been said, of having to vote down the submission of this plan, and then I think officers would then need to go away and see what type of different plan you would like us to come up with. So I think the alternative motion would result in something that we simply don't have to submit in front of us.
Thank you very much for that advice. Leader of the Council, did you want to speak now, or was it in answer to Councillor Harper's?
Not to Councillor Harper's proposed amendment, Chairman, but I would like to make some comment.
Please do.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think it's important to emphasise that the consequences of not agreeing to this resolution, they've been set out very plainly. That if, in fact, we don't submit the plan to the inspector, the chances are that we will lose control of our planning system and there will be speculative development throughout Moyle Valley. That's the consequence of what those members who oppose submitting this, that's the consequence of their action if it was successful. And they need to be aware of that. They need to be aware that that is what they're voting for. And I think it's important to assess that. I did think, Chairman, it's important that throughout this whole process, we've tried to build consensus. We have tried to be non-political. We have tried to create a situation where all members can be involved, all members can participate, and there's huge consultation exercises throughout Moyle Valley. And that's taken us to the point that we are at today. And that's why I was really very disappointed to hear Councillor Friend's election broadcast, because essentially this isn't about those. This is about member contributions and how we proceed with the local plan. There have been huge opportunities for members of the opposition to contribute to the development of this plan. The Local Plan Working Group has consistently invited people to contribute and consistently invited new ideas. And when Councillor Friend says we would have created policies that would resolve all of those problems, my question to him is, why didn't you? Why didn't you put those policies on the table so we could all have the opportunity of looking at them and seeing whether in fact they were acceptable and could be incorporated into the plan? But we got nothing. There was nothing positive that came forward from Councillor Friend or Councillor Friend's group. All that we had is negative comments. And negative comments aimed at, basically, aimed at the political side of this and not at actually helping with the plan. When he says there are missed opportunities, I'd go back to him and say, yes, there are, but you've missed the opportunity. You've missed the opportunity of making a significant contribution to the way that we move forward. And remember, Chairman, that this plan is constrained by the rules set by a Conservative government. And that Conservative government indicated that Mull Valley needed to build 458 houses each year. And in fact, the Conservative administration that was in power at the time created the basis of a local plan that would have delivered that and would have created and would have built a huge number of houses across Greenbelt sites. What we've been able to do by very careful consideration is to reduce that number from 458 to 353. Yet we are told that that isn't satisfactory. Could you sum up, please? And I must stop speaking now. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor James James Chambers, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the council staff and officers who have been involved with this process until now. I have heard from many residents that this local plan is a Conservative plan, despite the Liberal Democrats having been in control now for nearly 3 years. I feel responsibility should be taken for this plan, which at every stage the Conservative group have voted against. As a newly elected councillor in Bookham, as a new councillor elected by Bookham residents in May, I have recent experience of listening to their concerns regarding this local plan. I do not believe this plan has sufficiently taken their concerns on board, and therefore I cannot support this plan, and I urge my fellow Bookham councillors to, like me, listen to their residents and reject this plan. Furthermore, I was shocked and disappointed to hear Councillor Daly say she is against the Greenbelt development, only then to say she will support this plan, which builds on Bookham's Greenbelt land.
Thank you. The next member I have is Councillor Clayton Wellman. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose I should first as well thank the officers and Councillor Cooksey in particular, but also every member of this council has contributed to this long and arduous process of putting this plan together. I must comment and reiterate that those who put forward the view that there is too much building in the north are putting forth a fallacy. It is actually a very balanced number of dwellings in the north and the south. And for example, you know, it's unfortunate, of course, to lose any Greenbelt land, but the number of houses planned for Dorking, including Greenbelt sites, is twice that of Bookham. We all have to face this. We need the houses, and we're doing what we can. We are doing it in the best way possible. I find it ironic that the Conservatives have said they wouldn't build on Greenbelt land, but the version of the plan they gave us had twice as much Greenbelt development in it. Yes, we've removed around half of the Greenbelt development that was put forward when we took on this plan. So we have worked hard at it. And it is a plan that we've worked on, and we brought others in, everyone in, to try and do that, and to put the best brains we can on it. So thankfully, we've removed those from the clutches of the Conservative central government and its targets, which are what have driven it, as some councillors have mentioned. That's what's put this extreme stress on this council. But we've also saved it from the ex-Mole Valley Conservative administration and reduced that Greenbelt demand severely. If we don't submit this plan now, we commit. What we commit to is losing control of our planning process and of any ability to restrict Greenbelt building. That would be an absolute disaster for all of us. We mustn't let that happen. We must protect our district and our Greenbelt, and the only way to do that is to make difficult choices, and voting to submit this plan is the way to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. The next member on the list is Councillor Ciara Vivian Robinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
I'd like to speak about how this local plan relates to Transform Leatherhead, which has been obviously one of the key regeneration projects for this council since 2015. And the local plan, to my mind, is really integral to Transform Leatherhead and to the improvements to Leatherhead more generally. The redevelopment of Bull Hill will enable improvements to the Swan Centre, and we all know that residents want to see the town centre improved. It will bring life back into the whole town. And as we reach one of the key milestones for Transform Leatherhead, this really, progressing the local plan enables the vision for Leatherhead to really progress. It will enable revitalisation of the town with new residents. It will preserve the green spaces that residents demand. It will see improvements to biodiversity. It will increase our leisure and entertainment opportunities. It will safeguard businesses in the town because of new policies that are being introduced, whilst also preserving the heritage assets and the conservation areas within Leatherhead, which really create the tradition of Leatherhead. So we are ensuring that not only can Leatherhead be a modern and progressive town, but it can also preserve those heritage assets. So for me, this is really a very key moment in the Transform Leatherhead project. I was, at the same time, very surprised to hear Councillor Friend say that this is essentially the same plan, because we have reduced the number of properties which are proposed in Leatherhead by over 900, the vast majority of those from Greenbelt sites. So to suggest that this is essentially the same as the Regulation 18 plan is astounding to me. And I would reiterate that at no point has this administration had the support of the Conservatives in challenging the housing targets which are imposed on us by the government. And it is a shame to me that they have not been willing to provide that support. So I do wholeheartedly support this local plan.
Thank you, Councillor. My list at the moment doesn't have any other names, so effectively I'm saying almost not last orders, but Councillor Claire Malcolmson, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Several people in this room have already mentioned that no one wants to build on the green belt, and I would second, third, fourth and fifth agree with that. No one wants to build on the green belt. As it's been mentioned, this administration has halved the amount of sites on the green belt, and we've increased more brownfield sites, and the facts are that I've sat on 3 administrations throughout my experience as a councillor, and this is the first draft local plan that has actually raised the criteria for putting sites in, making sure they were very, very well scrutinised, and taking sites out. It's the first time of all those 3 administrations that I've been able to see sites being taken out. It's a fact that all the councillors in this room were invited to the PPWG meetings where we all discussed all of this for many, many years. It's also a fact that we are stuck between a rock and a hard place because of this government. It's also a fact that once this local plan has gone through, that we will be able to build more affordable housing. And at the moment, it's a fact that without this local plan, climate change mitigating problems are climate mitigating issues are actually being held back, because at the moment we cannot implement what we want to put in, which is 20% less emissions and 20% increase in net biodiversity and major developments being carbon zero. Now, this is very, very important for the rest of the world and for our country and for everybody's well-being. It's also a fact that to talk about carbon negative is actually a very difficult issue at the moment, and the last administrations did nothing to mitigate climate change, or did very, very little. And also, it is a fact that we are held back by building restrictions which come from government. We are restricted, but we are doing our huge and making a huge effort to bring in as many biodiversity and climate change initiatives as possible. It is a fact that this local plan is actually a self-defense mechanism. By only putting the few unfortunate greenbelt sites into this local plan, we are protecting the rest of the greenbelt, and it is only a very small percentage of the greenbelt that is actually being put into this local plan. And it is an absolute fact that anyone voting against submitting this local plan will be voting for the government to come in, take over, and developers to be able to build wherever they want. And sadly, that is the worst fact of all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd like to now ask Councillor Barge-Hark to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, this plan has taken more than 4 years to prepare. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate the team, jointly with the officers who have actually made this possible to bring this plan forward. And this is not only, we are being actually asked to put this forward as a process to go to the inspector. We are not really asked to vote for approval or disapproval. So therefore, I think it is the best plan that we got at the moment before us. Now, as far as the green belts are concerned, I believe when I was first elected, we have been having this policy not building on the green belts. But unfortunately, this plan, the government actually has imposed on us to build as many houses as possible. Now, first of all, they actually wanted 450 houses. Now, if we went along with the government policy, then there will be a disaster within our area to build anywhere we wanted. But because we have opposed the government plan and bring it down, to cut it down to 350. Now, if we don't have this plan available, then this will be taken out of our control. And there will be building, the developer will build anywhere they like, which is not what we want, which is not what the residents want. So therefore, I think this is the best plan that we got at this moment of time. And I believe this is the way we should go forward and approve this plan, because if we don't, then there will be a problem for the whole area, and there will be a building anywhere and everywhere. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Could I now ask Councillor Emma Norman? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I've made it somewhat of a mantra to be a non-party political councillor, and I've got through nearly my entire 4-year term sticking to that mantra, but I'm afraid that tonight is the straw that has broken the camel's back, because I've listened to my Conservative colleagues and the points that they've made this evening, and I cannot believe the contradictions in their arguments. While they are opposed to building in the north and think there is too much building in the north of the district, they are also opposed to the sites proposed in the south of the district. They are opposed to greenbelt sites, but they are also opposed to intensification of urban locations. Sir Paul Beresford and James Friend, Councillor Friend this evening, have said that they support higher rise buildings in our town centre locations, but I know that locally in Leatherhead, they campaign in opposition to the proposed higher rise buildings that are put forward in the local plan. Councillor Brooks has criticised this council for not putting forward enough infrastructure solutions. But let's not forget that the numbers hoisted upon us have been hoisted upon us by this centrally from this Conservative government. And what is this Conservative government doing to resolve the shortage of GPs up and down the length and breadth of the country? My husband is a GP. He works 12 hours every single day. There are not enough GPs. I don't think Mole Valley can resolve that. So do you trust Boris Johnson to resolve these issues? Do you trust this Conservative government to resolve these issues? Do you trust a Conservative Mole Valley Council to come forward with a better local plan than the one that's in front of us this evening? I certainly don't. You can be opposed to what's in here, but what are you going to do differently? What is your plan? What is your solution? I have not heard anything. And that's why I will support the plan that is going forward this evening, because it's a balance, it's a compromise, it's good. It's not perfect, but it's better than what they would do. So that's my opposition to Councillor Friend's call to the electorate. That's mine. Do you trust them to do a better job than us? I don't. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Our next speaker is Councillor Richard Moyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I'd like to thank the officers for their considerable input, particularly under pandemic conditions. I can't remember if I'm zooming and teaming, but I think I must be here this evening. Yesterday evening at this council's DMC, or a planning committee for members of the public not aware of what DMC is, Councillors Malcolmson and Adams were deeply concerned at the proposed cutting down of a single row of conifer trees. Yet this evening they appear to be willing to build on acres and acres of greenbelt. An incredible contradiction. Councillor Norman and our leader the council leader have strongly suggested that members of the Conservative group have not been involved, yet Councillor Wellman has thanked members from across the chamber for their involvement in this plan. So yet again, another contradiction. I'm sure there are some, possibly many members in this chamber this evening who have campaigned to be elected on a ticket where they have said they would not support development on our precious greenbelt if the relevant communities, their communities, did not want said development. The community of Bookham, at both Regulation 18 and 19 and at the draft local plan roadshows, very clearly indicated to this council, this administration, and to all Bookham district councillors, they do not wish to see development on the vast majority of greenbelt in Bookham. In particular, the community of Bookham does not wish to see development on Preston Cross and Maddox Park. I would like to think that all Bookham councillors, possibly and probably and hopefully more, present this evening would respect this Bookham community point of view and vote accordingly this evening. It has been suggested to me that we must vote for this draft local plan, having let residents send representations to this council to be sent on to the government inspector and allow the inspector, as Councillor Adams has said this evening, to hopefully make the right decision redevelopment on our greenbelt. That's a huge gamble for our future generations and the future of our greenbelt. When it's gone, it's gone. I would go further. It's passing the buck, a lack of leadership on behalf of this administration, expecting and relying on our residents' representations and a government inspector to do the right thing when they cannot. This evening, when voting, I would ask all members to honour their election campaign promises, and in particular all Bookham district councillors, to respect their election campaign promises, to respect their community wishes and vote against this plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, though. Thank you. Councillor David Draper, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's interesting this evening. I think probably the only people who want us to build on the Greenbelt are the Conservative government. No councillor here wishes to build on the Greenbelt, but we have a figure, we have a numerical figure given to us by the government which we have to comply with. Chairman, it seems that the Conservative group this evening are somewhat numerically challenged. They produced their own plan, which was far greater dense development on the Greenbelt than the plan we have before us this evening. They have opposed, and that is their right. It is their job to be the opposition. But what they're not is constructively opposing at all. We're having opposition which is purely negative. It's sad because together, as a council, we should be able to present a plan which meets the needs of all the councillors here and of our residents. We have to meet the government's target. I don't want, like our MP, 12-storey blocks outside Dorking Station. I think many members here would want to see that. Do we want Dorking to look like Woking? I'd rather not. People have said they want more building in the villages, less building elsewhere. But building in the villages, as Councillor Clack mentioned, probably means building on the Greenbelt. Probably couldn't mean anything else. So we have very mixed views coming from the Conservative group. What we have, Chairman, is a plan which has been carefully thought out with the opportunity for all members to contribute, all members to put their views forward. Each of us here will have needs to build somewhere on the Greenbelt. As we've heard from the Vice Chairman to the Council, we sit here tonight, many of us, with families who need somewhere to live. Every one of us will return tonight to a home that once was on a greenfield site. Every one of us. And people objected to it. My own house is built on the previous landscape garden of a mansion next to Meadowbank. I wonder how people felt when that was developed on. And yet we have to deliver what the Conservative government have given us. That is what's before us tonight. I welcome a name vote, because I welcome perhaps seeing James Friend vote against his own government, against the figures which his government have given us to deliver. Perhaps the Conservatives will like that when we come, as he does, election campaign this evening, which is absolutely not needed. What is needed is unanimity in trying to present something which is tangible, thought out, across the chamber, and delivers for our people in Mole Valley. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Paul Kennedy, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. An earlier councillor challenged Liberal Democrat councillors to take ownership for what we've achieved in the last 3 years, and I'm very happy to do that. There are two main aspects to that. The first is the policy improvements that Councillor Margaret Cooksey mentioned earlier on climate change, on affordable and particularly social housing, on biodiversity, and yes, on infrastructure as well. The Council's infrastructure strategy is a living document which will continue throughout the process, and it has been improved. It isn't enough. I'm not satisfied with what Surrey County Council and other agencies are doing, and I was particularly disappointed with the Levelling Up white paper that was published yesterday. There's a map on one page of that which shows what's being offered to each of the areas of the UK, and Surrey has just one single dot for the gigabit project, which is a rehash of rural broadband. And I looked through the project Gigabit to see where Surrey appeared, and I couldn't find anything at all. So the government is doing absolutely nothing for Surrey and nothing for Mole Valley. The other change that we've made to the draft plan we inherited from the Conservative-led administration is that we've reduced the amount of Greenbelt housing that they were proposing by roughly 2,000 Greenbelt homes. That is a substantial improvement, and we've done that by challenging the government's housing targets and using the proviso in paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework. And that is a huge improvement. In the north, it has meant that instead of over 1,400 Greenbelt homes in Leatherhead, Fetcham and Bookham, we now have less than 400 and none at all in Fetcham, which is why I'm very happy to support submission at this stage. Inevitably, there are sites still in there. Like others, I don't want them in there. They're there because of government planning policies, and I look forward to addressing those in front of the inspector. What I haven't heard from the Conservatives is whether they support us in using paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework to reduce Greenbelt homes by 2,000. Because if they're not supporting that, they are in effect insisting that we meet the government housing targets in full. They haven't said where they would do it. The reality is they would want us to build 2,000 more Greenbelt sites than is currently proposed. I heard Councillor Harper's suggestion, why don't we just put it in without any Greenbelt sites? I think one of the problems we have is actually the sites we've deleted are being challenged by the developers. And I think it's very important that we all support the policy that this administration has put in, because we need to defend those deletions.
Could you sum up, please?
It makes no difference whether we take them in or out. They will be debated before the inspector. Please support submission at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other members? before I ask Councillor Margaret Cooksey to sum up the debate and if she can address some of the... it's been a very wide-ranging debate, so I will be as flexible as I can on the timing. I just wanted to add to, or make some comments myself, because I think all members received an email from a person in Hookwood. I just wanted to make sure that everybody had seen that, because I did make a commitment to that person that everybody, I would check that everybody had seen that. I see nodding heads, thank you very much. I just want to say, I'm a little disappointed. It has been a little bit of a meeting that perhaps we'd normally have in sort of March time. Planning, when we come to planning applications, is always non-political. And tonight has been a bit of a dingbat. I hope that from the residents who are here and who may watch this in some future downloaded version, will take on board that tonight is, shall I say, an unusual debate, because in the process of building this plan or proposing this plan, that sort of political element hasn't been that live. It has been more of a constructive process rather than seeking to score points. And I'm particularly thinking that for residents who are concerned of sites nearby, I don't want anybody to think that it's just been a political fight along the way. That members have fought their corner at PPWG, the Planning Policy Working Group, and the plan has developed over a period of time. I also wanted just to draw attention, and this isn't to criticise any members at all, but this is just to say that one member said that the process was completely transparent. Part of the plan-making process has been held in private, and members have not been able to disclose those because obviously when you're looking at creating a potential plan, there could be effects on developers trying to buy up sites if they thought that things were happening. The plan process does include the public consultation that was entirely transparent, as is required, but I don't think anybody could say that 100% of the process was transparent, because we did have meetings in private, but for very good reasons, so that developers weren't sort of speculatively buying sites along the way. Members of the public might also wonder, just what does 56 tower blocks look like? Because nobody's defined how big those are. And if the Greenbelt sites save 56 tower blocks, does that mean it's the equivalent of 56 tower blocks being built on the Greenbelt? It's a very nebulous phrase, and personally I don't think it's ever been exactly defined. I think that as the chairman of the council, I would like to say a huge thank you to the officers and to you members for the process, whether you like the current plan or not. It's been a huge amount of work for officers and for you members, and being a councillor, I know you don't always get thanks, so I want to thank you for your work in that process so far. So, Councillor Margaret Cooksey, could you please sum up the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your words that have helped to do that before I start. I do agree with you that it has been a very disappointing debate. Planning should always be non-political. This evening has certainly been anything but. And I was particularly disappointed by the Leader of the Opposition. Councillor Friend and I don't often disagree entirely. We more often than not agree on planning issues. And I was so disappointed to hear what was specifically a party political broadcast and made to be so. And it sounded as if Councillor Friend disliked all aspects of this particular edition of the local plan. And that has not come through at any point during the process. He's raised issues, he's been part of the debates, but he certainly has not at any point made the sort of comments that he's made this evening about the things that he dislikes about the plan. This is not the time to be doing it, nor is it the time for Councillor Harper to change his spots, because when we talked about putting the Regulation 19 version out to public consultation, he was in favour of that, and he said some very complimentary things about the plan itself. This evening, he wants to scrap the plan. He wants to start again, really, because you cannot remove any of the sites that are in this current version at this point, because it just takes out the balance from the whole plan, and it would have to be started again. Councillor Harper raised points about highways, about greenbelt methodology, about air pollution, about AONB review. Well, all of these things are part and parcel of the discussions that we've had ongoing with other organisations, in the same way that Councillor Brooks talked about infrastructure, and she talked about special needs education, and talking to the clinical commissioning group. All of these things have been happening, are happening, will continue to happen, because, as someone else has said tonight, the infrastructure document is a live document and will be a working document as this plan moves through the processes. The Greenbelt methodology was changed very specifically after the Regulation 18 consultation, and that was in order to make a situation more transparent than it had been before, and to be consistent with how we handled any of the sites that were either in or out of that document at the time. And those members, like Councillor Clack and like Councillor Huggins, who talked about disappointment of things coming in or going out, that's to do with the fact that the Greenbelt methodology was improved, was upgraded in order to have that kind of consistency and transparency. There were comments from Mary Huggins and others about, and Councillor David Hawksworth, about not having votes as we went through the processes. Well, the work happened through the Planning Policy Working Group, and that tells you exactly why there were no votes. It was a working group, and the Constitution doesn't require votes at a working group. It's a working group. We get on with it, we work through the issues, and we note the comments that have been made. Councillor Keeley talked about flooding. Well, of course, that's the work of the Environment Agency and Surrey County Council. Again, that's part and parcel of the work that will be ongoing. We have more comments about Greenbelt from Councillor James Chambers and Councillor Richard Moyes. Councillor Sarah Chambers simply made threats. I'm not quite sure what she wanted to get at and what her problem with the current plan is, but she didn't tell us that. She just made threats, which is most unfortunate. Now, if we're thinking about the Greenbelt, and that's clearly a very, very important issue, the number of comments made in the Regulation 18 consultation there were 4,031 respondents. When we got to the Regulation 19 comments, there were 847 representations. A good number of those happened to be very positive comments, and comments that were constructive and helped us to make some minor changes of a positive nature from people who had very clear knowledge about the issues that they were talking about. But, of course, a good number of those comments came from businesses, from builders and developers, as you would expect at this stage. The council is actually, given what we've removed from the Greenbelt at this point, protecting 99.3% of our Greenbelt. And the choice is a small amount of Greenbelt release, or, and those people in the north had better listen carefully to this, 245 stories of development in a belt from Buckham to Ashtead. And I'm sure that that's not what you would want us to be proposing. So, Mr. Chairman, I will wind up now. You've been very kind at giving me a bit of extra time. All of those people who've spoken against the recommendation this evening, I hope will think before they actually make their vote in this named vote. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cooksey. And yes, I did extend the time because I thought it was useful to allow you to address each point. Thank you. So, I would therefore like us to proceed to a named vote. So, when you hear your name, you can either vote in favour, against, or abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Roger Adams.
For.
Lynn Brooks.
Against.
Simon Budd.
Against.
Leslie Bushnell.
For.
Helen Clack.
Against.
James Chambers.
Against.
Sarah Chambers.
Against.
Chris Coghlan.
For.
Margaret Cooksey.
For.
Stephen Cooksey.
For.
Mary Cooper.
Against.
Elizabeth Daly.
For.
David Draper.
For.
James Friend.
Against.
Nancy Goodacre.
For.
Raj Hack.
For.
David Harper.
Against.
David Hawksworth.
Against.
Rosemary Hobbs.
For.
Mary Huggins.
Against.
Chris Hunt.
Abstain.
Tracy Keeley.
Against.
Bridget Kendrick.
For.
Paul Kennedy.
For.
Claire Malcolmson.
For.
Simon Moss.
Against.
Richard Moyes.
Against.
Emma Norman.
For.
Paul Potter.
For.
David Preedy.
For.
Alan Riley. Elsie Rowsome. Caroline Salmon.
For.
Gary Stansfield.
Against.
Kira Vivian Robinson.
For.
Hazel Watson.
For.
Clayton Wellman.
For.
Nick Wright.
For.
Charles Yarwood.
Against.
Thank you.
Thank you, members. The voting was 22 votes in favour, 16 against, with 1 abstention. So, therefore, the council will submit the plan to the next stage in the process. Thank you. There is no other business on the agenda, and therefore that concludes the council meeting. Thank you. And as I said at the moment, at the beginning, if we could just let the members of the public vacate first. Thank you. And thank you very much, members of the public, for the way that you've listened to the debate.